It was one of those quiet mornings that start like any other. The sun was still behind the clouds, the air felt cool, and the street outside was calm. Inside a small house at the edge of town, a family of 4 was beginning their day without any idea that life was about to change forever. The father, a calm and gentle man in his early 40s, was already awake before dawn. He had a habit of sitting by the window with his cup of tea, looking at the sunrise as the world came alive. He worked as a mechanic at a small garage a few blocks away. He wasn't rich, but he was proud of what he had: a roof over his family's head and 2 children who made him smile every single day. The twins were 18, a boy and a girl who looked almost identical except for their hair. They shared the same sense of humor, the same laugh, and the same way of talking fast when they got excited. They had just finished high school and were planning to start college soon. The boy loved to draw cars just like his father worked on them, while the girl wanted to study nursing. Their mother was the heart of the home, the one who woke everyone up, made breakfast, and kept things running smoothly. That morning she moved around the kitchen humming softly as she prepared eggs and toast. The sound of the frying pan mixed with the laughter of the twins as they argued about who would use the bathroom first. "Every day it's the same thing with you two," she said, shaking her head with a small smile. The father walked in, buttoning his old work shirt. He sat at the table, still half lost in thought. He always looked tired in the mornings, but there was warmth in his eyes when he looked at his children. "You're both visiting Grandma today, right?" he asked. The girl nodded. "Yes, after breakfast. We'll bring her some of that homemade jam she likes." He smiled. "Good, drive carefully and don't rush. The road by the river gets slippery after rain." The boy laughed. "We'll be fine, Dad, you worry too much." The father just shook his head, smiling. "That's my job." They all sat down together for breakfast. It was a simple meal, bread, eggs, and tea, but in that small kitchen it felt like a moment of peace. The family talked about college plans, weekend chores, and their grandmother's garden. Everything felt normal, ordinary. No one imagined it was their last breakfast together. After they finished eating, the twins got ready for their trip. The girl packed some snacks in a small basket for their grandmother. The boy checked the car outside, an old sedan that had been with the family for years. The father had repaired it so many times that he joked it ran only on his faith. Before leaving, the twins hugged their mother. She told them not to stay too late and reminded them to call once they reached. The father stood by the gate waving as they got into the car. "Drive safe," he shouted. The boy honked twice, smiling, and they disappeared down the street. The father watched until the car turned the corner. He stayed there for a few seconds, then sighed and walked back inside. He kissed his wife on the forehead, grabbed his lunchbox, and left for work. He always walked to the garage, and it wasn't far, and he liked the quiet of the morning walk. The small garage was already busy when he arrived. The sound of tools, engines, and chatter filled the air. He greeted his coworkers with his usual calm smile and got to work on a car that needed a new brake system. He was skilled and patient, the kind of man who didn't rush things, who always double-checked every detail. Around mid-morning, clouds began to cover the sky. The weather changed fast, and soon a light rain started to fall. The father looked outside, worried for a moment, thinking about the twins driving to their grandmother's house. He hoped they had pulled over somewhere safe, but then he shook the thought away. They were careful kids. They knew how to handle themselves. Meanwhile, miles away on the highway, the twins were laughing as they played music and talked about their future. The girl said she couldn't wait to start college and help people. The boy teased her about how she would be bossing patients around. She threw a napkin at him, and they both laughed until tears came out. It was the kind of laughter that comes only from years of being inseparable. The road ahead was wet, but they didn't seem worried. They had driven this route so many times before. The boy tightened his grip on the steering wheel as they approached a sharp turn near the river. The rain got heavier, the wipers moving faster. Back at the garage, the father's coworker called out to him for help with a stubborn bolt. The father kneeled under the car, tightening a screw carefully. He worked quietly, humming a song he used to sing to the twins when they were little. It was a normal day, and yet something in his chest felt heavy. He couldn't explain it, a strange uneasiness like a shadow crossing his thoughts. He tried to ignore it, but the feeling wouldn't leave. At home, the mother had finished cleaning up and was folding laundry while the radio played softly. She looked at the clock. The twins should have reached by now. She thought about calling them but decided to wait a few more minutes. As she went to hang the clothes, the rain outside grew stronger. The sky turned darker, thunder rolled in the distance, hours passed slowly. The twins didn't call. The father kept working, occasionally checking the time. The mother finally picked up her phone and dialed, but it went straight to voicemail. She frowned, trying again. Still nothing. In the early afternoon, the rain began to ease. The father was finishing up a repair when his boss came in holding a phone, his face pale. He whispered something to one of the workers and everyone in the garage fell silent. The father looked up, sensing something was wrong. His boss hesitated before walking toward him. "There's been an accident," he said softly. "On the highway near the river, it's your kid's car." For a moment the father didn't move. His hands froze, his tools slipping from his grip. "What did you say?" he asked quietly. "They were in a crash. You need to go to the hospital." The father's heart started pounding. He grabbed his coat and ran out of the garage without saying another word. The hospital was 10 minutes away, but it felt like hours. Rain splashed on his face as he ran through the streets, his breath short, his thoughts spinning. When he reached the emergency room, he saw his wife standing by the door, her face white as paper. She looked at him with trembling lips and shook her head slowly. He didn't need to ask. He knew. He stumbled forward, tears blurring his vision, and the world seemed to fade around him. The sounds of the hospital became distant. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His chest felt tight, like it was being crushed from the inside. He clutched at it, gasping for air. The next thing anyone knew, he collapsed on the floor. Doctors rushed to help, calling his name, but he was gone before they could even get him to a bed. 2 tragedies in the same hour. A father and his twins, all taken from the same home on the same day. Back at the house, the mother sat motionless on the couch, surrounded by silence. The rain had stopped, but it didn't matter. Nothing felt real anymore. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering, unsure how to comfort her. Some brought food, some just held her hand and cried with her. The news spread through the town like a storm. People couldn't believe it. 3 lives gone, connected by love and fate. The father who worked every day to give his children a future, and the twins who shared every dream, all gone within hours. That evening, as the sky turned dark again, the house that once echoed with laughter was now filled with silence. The mother sat by the window where her husband used to sip his tea. On the table beside her lay 3 pictures, the twins smiling at their graduation and the father standing proudly beside them. Outside, the streetlights flickered in the drizzle. Inside, she whispered a quiet prayer, that wherever they were still together. Because deep down, she knew the bond they shared was something that even death couldn't fully break. That night, the town mourned with her. But no one yet knew that this tragedy held something more. Something that would soon be revealed during the funeral. Something that would leave everyone speechless. The rain had stopped by the time the ambulance reached the hospital, but the air still smelled of wet earth and sorrow. Inside the emergency ward, everything felt frozen. Nurses moved quietly. Doctors whispered among themselves, and the mother sat on a wooden bench with her hands clasped tightly together. Her eyes were red from crying, but no tears came anymore. It was as if her body had run out of them. A nurse came over gently and asked if she wanted some water. She didn't answer. She just looked through the small window toward the hallway, where 2 stretchers were being wheeled in, covered with white sheets. She knew what was beneath them. She could recognize her children anywhere, even from far away. Her heart sank deeper than words could describe. The doctor came and spoke softly, explaining how the accident happened, how the car had lost control on a curve near the river, how it hit the side barrier before spinning into a tree. He said they didn't suffer much, that it had been quick. But those words didn't bring comfort. They only echoed in her ears like a sound she wished she could shut out. When the father's body arrived shortly after, no one could believe it. 2 tragedies within the same hour. The hospital staff stood still, unable to make sense of what they were witnessing. Some of the workers quietly said it was as if the father's heart had known the truth before anyone told him. By evening, relatives began to arrive. The mother sat quietly as one of her brothers tried to comfort her. Her face was blank, her eyes fixed on the floor. Every few minutes she would whisper, "They were just here this morning. They were laughing." She repeated it like she was trying to convince herself that it was all a mistake. The next morning, the house was full of people. Friends, neighbors, co-workers all gathered to help. The smell of flowers filled the living room, but it couldn't hide the heaviness that hung in the air. Someone brought food, but no one could eat. The father's co-workers from the garage came too, their faces lined with disbelief. One of them said quietly, "He kept talking about his kids yesterday. He said he wanted to fix the car one last time before giving it to them for college." The mother sat in the corner, holding a photo of her family, the twins smiling in their graduation gowns, their father standing behind them, his hands on their shoulders. That picture was taken just a few months ago when life still made sense. As the day went on, the sound of people crying mixed with the rain outside. It wasn't heavy rain, just a slow drizzle, like the sky was mourning with them. The twins' friends came too. They stood by the door holding flowers, whispering stories about how kind the twins were, how they always helped others. One friend said through tears, "They were the kind of people who made you feel better about life." Preparations for the funeral began that evening. The family decided to hold one ceremony for all three, the father and the twins, because separating them didn't feel right. They had always been together in life, and now they would stay together in rest. The funeral home workers arrived and began to make arrangements. 3 coffins were placed side by side, the father's in the middle, the twins on each side. The workers handled everything with quiet care, speaking softly as they arranged flowers and candles. The mother asked for their favorite flowers, white lilies for the twins and yellow roses for the father. That night, the mother couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw their faces, heard their laughter echoing in the hallway. She sat on the couch with the light on, holding her husband's work jacket in her arms. The smell of grease and engine oil still clung to it. It reminded her of him, steady, hard-working, always calm. She pressed her face against it and cried quietly until the sun came up. The next morning, the church bells rang softly. People began arriving early for the funeral. The small church at the center of town had never seen so many people at once. There were classmates, neighbors, relatives, co-workers, even strangers who had just heard about what happened. Everyone wanted to show support. Inside the church, candles flickered gently around the 3 coffins. The twins looked peaceful, their faces soft and calm. They had been dressed in simple clothes, the boy in his favorite shirt, the girl in a light blue dress she wore often. The father lay in the middle wearing his best suit, the one he used for weddings and special occasions. His hands were folded neatly on his chest, a small flower tucked between them. People walked in quietly, whispering prayers. Some cried openly, others just stood there unable to speak. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of the priest's soft voice and the occasional sniffle from the crowd. The mother sat in the front row, surrounded by family. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were dry. She had cried so much that her tears had turned into a kind of emptiness. She looked at her husband and children side by side and whispered under her breath, "You're together now." As the ceremony began, the priest spoke about love, family, and faith. He said that sometimes life takes away the people we love the most, not to punish us, but because their journey is complete. He said that true love never ends. It only changes form. Many people couldn't hold back their tears. The father's co-workers bowed their heads. The twins' friends held each other, sobbing quietly. The atmosphere was full of sadness, but also something else, a deep sense of unity. Everyone in that church felt connected by the same pain, the same helplessness. After the prayers, people took turns walking up to the coffins to say goodbye. One by one, they placed flowers beside them. A neighbor laid down a small drawing the twins had once made for her child. One of the father's co-workers left a wrench beside his coffin, saying softly, "You were the best of us." When it was the mother's turn, she stood slowly, holding a small white handkerchief. She walked up to the coffins, her steps weak but steady. She placed her hands on each of them, first on her husband's, then on her children's. She whispered something that only she could hear. Then she looked at her husband's face for a long time. It almost seemed like he was just sleeping. She brushed his hair back gently and said, "You kept your promise. You're still watching over them." As the last visitors left the church, the undertakers began to prepare the coffins for transport. The mother stayed behind for a moment, unable to move. She wanted one last look, one last moment before they were gone forever. Outside, the weather had changed again. The rain had stopped completely, and the sun was breaking through the clouds. The light poured through the church windows, landing gently on the 3 coffins. It gave everything a strange, peaceful glow. Some people said later that it felt like a sign, like the heavens themselves were welcoming them home. That evening, when everyone returned to the house, the silence felt heavier than ever. The guests tried to comfort the mother, but she barely spoke. She sat by the window watching the light fade. Her sister brought her tea, but she didn't drink it. "I don't know how to live now," she whispered. "They were my world." Her sister held her hand. "You'll find a way. They wouldn't want you to give up." The mother nodded slowly, but her eyes didn't move from the window. Outside, the sky was painted in orange and purple. It was the same sky her husband used to watch every morning, and now it felt like a distant memory. Late that night, after everyone had left, the mother went into the twins' room. Everything was just as they had left it. The books on the table, the half-folded clothes, the drawing of their grandmother's garden. She sat on the bed holding one of the pillows close to her chest. The scent of her children still lingered. She whispered softly into the quiet room, "You promised you'd come home tonight." The tears came again, this time without control. She cried until she couldn't breathe, until she felt empty again. But in that moment of sorrow, she also felt something else. A strange calm, as if the room itself was wrapping around her, comforting her. She closed her eyes, and for a second she could almost hear their laughter again, faint but real. When she finally stood up, she looked at their photo on the wall, the 3 of them smiling together. She placed her hand on it and whispered, "Tomorrow I'll say goodbye, but not forever." She turned off the light, leaving the room in quiet darkness. Outside, the moonlight fell softly through the window, resting on the picture frame, as if reminding her that some bonds never fade. Even in the darkest night, what no one knew then was that the next day's funeral would reveal something. No one could explain something that would make everyone believe that love can truly reach beyond this life. The morning of the burial was cold and quiet. The air carried that strange kind of stillness that feels too heavy to breathe in. The sun was hidden behind thick gray clouds, and the wind moved softly through the trees. It was the kind of day when even nature seemed to be grieving. The churchyard was already filled with people before the mother arrived. The 3 coffins were placed side by side beneath a white tent. Each one was covered with flowers, white lilies, yellow roses, and soft pink petals the neighbors had brought from their gardens. The twins' classmates stood together, holding each other for comfort. The father's co-workers gathered near the back, heads bowed, their work jackets still smelling faintly of oil and metal. When the mother stepped out of the car, silence spread through the crowd. She wore a black dress and held a small folded paper in her hand. Her steps were slow but steady. Her sister walked beside her, gently guiding her forward. Every pair of eyes followed her, not out of pity but out of respect. Everyone in that small town knew she had lost everything in one single day. She stopped near the coffins, her fingers trembling as she reached out to touch the edge of the one in the middle. That was her husband's. On each side lay the twins, their coffins smaller but decorated with flowers and ribbons. She stood there for a long time, just staring, her lips moving silently. No one could hear what she said, but some noticed a faint smile cross her face for just a second, as if she was whispering something only they could understand. The priest began to speak. His voice was soft and calm but filled with emotion. He talked about love, about how some families share a bond so deep that even death cannot break it. He said that sometimes souls are so connected that they choose to walk their final journey together. People nodded through their tears, many holding hands trying to find comfort in his words. Then came the sound of the church bells, slow and deep. Each ring echoed through the air like a heartbeat fading away. The mother closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For a moment, everything felt distant. She could almost hear her twins' laughter in the background, the sound of her husband's calm voice calling her name. It was as if time had folded, bringing back small memories she wanted to keep forever. After the prayers, it was time for the final goodbye. One by one, people came forward to pay their respects. Some placed flowers. Others left small notes or pictures. The twins' school friends left their graduation tassels, the ones they had planned to wear together next month. The father's co-workers placed his wrench and a photo of him smiling at the garage. Every gesture told a story. When it was the mother's turn, she stepped closer, her paper still in her hand. She opened it slowly, It was a letter she had written the night before. Her voice shook as she began to read it quietly, her words carried away by the wind. You always said love keeps us strong. You were right. Even now I can still feel you near me. You left together just as you lived, side by side. Maybe God knew none of you could live without the others. Her words broke halfway through, but she continued, whispering the rest through her tears. When she finished, she placed the letter on her husband's coffin, then gently touched each of the twins' coffins. The crowd stood in silence. Some cried openly. Some bowed their heads in prayer. The mother didn't move for a long moment. It was as if she was waiting for something, a sign maybe, or a feeling that they had truly heard her. Then something strange happened. A soft gust of wind passed through the tent. It wasn't strong, just enough to make the flowers flutter. A few petals lifted into the air and swirled gently before landing again, one on each coffin. People looked at each other quietly. The mother smiled faintly and whispered, "They heard me." Later, after the service ended, everyone slowly made their way out of the cemetery. Some stayed behind to help, others to comfort the mother. She stayed the longest. The priest stood nearby, giving her space but not leaving her alone. She watched as the coffins were lowered one by one into the ground, her tears falling quietly onto the earth. When the last shovel of soil was placed, she whispered something under her breath. "I'll see you again." As the crowd left, a few of the townspeople noticed something odd. The three graves, though dug separately, seemed perfectly aligned, as if planned that way. The father's grave was directly between the twins, almost like his arms were stretched out to hold them both. It was a small detail, but it left an impression on everyone who saw it. In the days that followed, the house felt like a shadow of what it once was. The laughter, the sound of the television, the small noises of everyday life, all gone. The mother woke up each morning to the sound of silence. Sometimes she'd walk through the twins' room and touch their things just to feel close to them. Their school bags were still on the shelf, the notebook still on the desk. On one page, she found a note scribbled by her daughter. "No matter what, family first." She held the paper to her chest and cried. The father's toolbox was still near the door. His shoes were lined up neatly, just as he'd left them. Every corner of the house carried a memory. Friends came by often, bringing food or just sitting with her in silence. They didn't talk much, but their presence helped. The twins' classmates visited too, leaving flowers and little notes. Some told stories about how the twins helped them through tough times at school, or how they were always together, laughing at everything. Listening to them made the mother smile through her tears. One evening, as she sat near the window, she noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. The clock on the wall had stopped. It was an old clock her husband had fixed years ago, one that never stopped ticking. She got up and checked it. It had stopped exactly at 11:47. That was the time the doctor had said her husband's heart had stopped. She stood there staring at it, unable to move. The next morning, she decided to visit the cemetery alone. The grass was still wet from the early dew, and the air smelled fresh. She brought fresh flowers and placed them gently on the graves. For the first time, she spoke out loud, her voice steady but soft. "I know you're all together now. I feel it. I just hope you know I'm okay too. I'll keep going. I'll try." She sat there for a long time, talking to them like they were still beside her. And maybe in some way they were. When she stood up to leave, she noticed something on the father's grave, a small piece of paper half buried under the flowers. She picked it up carefully. It was damp from the morning air, but she could still read the words. It was a line written in her husband's handwriting. It said, "Don't cry for us. We're still right here." Her knees went weak and she had to hold onto the fence for balance. She knew that handwriting. It was his. She hadn't seen that note before. Maybe it was something he had written and forgotten, or maybe it had blown there by chance. But deep down, she didn't believe in chance anymore. That evening, she placed the note inside a frame and kept it beside the family photo on the wall. She lit a small candle and whispered a prayer. The house still felt empty, but something inside her had changed. She didn't feel completely alone anymore. Days turned into weeks. The town slowly went back to its normal rhythm, but people still talked about the tragedy. They spoke in hushed voices about how strange it was that all three had died within hours, how peaceful they looked at the funeral, and how the father's grave seemed perfectly placed between the twins. Some said it was a coincidence. Others said it was destiny. But everyone agreed on one thing. The love in that family was something extraordinary, something that reached beyond what anyone could explain. The mother began to visit the cemetery every Sunday. She would bring fresh flowers and talk softly as if they could hear her. Sometimes she'd laugh at a memory. Other times she'd just sit quietly, lost in thought. It became her way of staying close to them, and though she didn't tell anyone, strange little things kept happening in the house. The clock that had stopped at 11:47 would sometimes tick again for a few minutes before stopping once more. On quiet nights, she thought she could hear faint laughter, like an echo from another time. Instead of being afraid, she found comfort in it. She began to believe that maybe love doesn't disappear. It just changes how it shows itself. Maybe her family was still watching, still around her, in ways she couldn't see. As the third week approached, the funeral director called to check on her, asking if she wanted to arrange permanent headstones for the graves. She agreed and went to choose the designs. When the engraver asked what she wanted written, she didn't hesitate on the father's stone. She asked for the words, "He lived for his family." On the twins' stones, she wrote, "Forever together." When the engraver looked up and smiled sadly, she simply said, "That's all that needs to be said." No one in town would forget that family. They became a symbol of how strong love could be, even when tested by tragedy. But what happened during the next visit to the graves, a small detail no one expected, would leave everyone speechless and make people question everything. They thought they knew about life and death. The funeral day arrived with a sky full of clouds that seemed to carry the same sadness everyone in town felt. The air was heavy and a quiet wind passed through the streets, almost as if nature itself was mourning. The mother hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red, her body weak, and her heart felt like it had forgotten how to beat properly. She moved like a person in a dream. Everything happening around her felt unreal. People from every corner of town gathered that morning. The small church at the top of the hill had never seen so many faces at once. Neighbors, friends, schoolmates of the twins, and the father's co-workers all came with flowers and heavy hearts. No one could still understand how a man and his two children could die on the same day. Some called it fate, some called it heartbreak, but most just stood in silence, unable to find any words. 3 coffins were placed at the front of the church. The father's was in the center, with the twins' coffins on each side. They were simple and white, covered with flowers that the community had brought. The sight was so painful that people turned their eyes away. The mother sat on a small wooden bench in front of them, holding a handkerchief in her trembling hands. Every few seconds she would look at the coffins as if hoping one of them might move and this nightmare would end. Inside the church, the sound of soft organ music filled the air. The priest spoke gently, his voice full of compassion. He talked about life, love, and how sometimes the bonds between family members are stronger than anything else. He said that maybe this family was too close to be separated, and that love had carried them away together. The mother listened quietly, but tears kept streaming down her face. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even asking why anymore. She just felt empty. As the service continued, stories about the family began to echo in whispers. People remembered how the father never missed a chance to help someone, how he worked late but still made time for his children. Others talked about the twins, how they always arrived together at school, how they shared one lunchbox, and how you could never talk about one without mentioning the other. They were like 2 halves of one soul, and everyone agreed that even in death they couldn't be apart. When the priest finished speaking, he asked close family members to come forward to say their final goodbyes. The church grew silent. Only the sound of sniffles and soft crying could be heard. The mother stood up slowly, her knees weak. 2 relatives helped her walk toward the front. She stopped between the 3 coffins, her eyes moving from one to another. For a long moment she didn't speak. She simply placed her hand over each coffin, one after the other, whispering something that no one could hear. Then the priest nodded to the undertaker, who carefully opened the top parts of the coffins so the family could see their loved ones one last time. The crowd leaned forward quietly. It was a moment no one would ever forget. The twins looked peaceful, almost as if they were sleeping. The girl's head was slightly tilted toward her brother, and his hand rested close to hers, their fingers barely touching. The father lay in the middle coffin, dressed neatly in the suit he used to wear on Sundays. His face looked calm, almost like he was still thinking, but then something happened that froze everyone in the room. The undertaker, while adjusting the flowers around the father's coffin, suddenly stepped back, his eyes wide. The priest noticed and walked closer. A few others leaned forward. The father's right hand, which had been folded neatly across his chest when the body was prepared, was now extended outward, palm open, reaching in the direction of the twins' coffins. Whispers spread through the crowd like a wave. People started murmuring softly, asking each other if they saw it too. Some thought someone must have moved the hand accidentally, but the undertaker quickly spoke up. His voice shook slightly as he explained that when he and his team had sealed the coffin the night before, both of the father's hands were folded properly on his chest, just like the usual way. He said he had checked it himself. Now, as everyone could see, one hand had somehow shifted outward during the night, stiff yet clearly reaching toward the twins. The mother gasped and covered her mouth. Her body shook as tears streamed down her cheeks. She whispered, "He found them." Even now, no one dared to say a word for several seconds. Some people started crying louder. Even the priest stood still, his eyes glistening. The undertaker, who had worked with hundreds of funerals before, said quietly, "I've never seen anything like this. Not once." The mother leaned forward, her hand trembling as she gently touched the edge of the father's coffin. Her voice was so soft that only those closest to her could hear. "You couldn't let them go, could you?" The silence in the church grew deeper. People began to feel something they couldn't explain. It wasn't fear. It was more like a feeling of awe, a sense that love had crossed beyond life itself. The sight of the father's outstretched hand reaching toward his children touched every heart there. It was as if his soul had refused to rest until he was near them again. The priest finally spoke, his voice calm but full of emotion. "Sometimes love moves in ways we cannot understand," he said. "Perhaps this is not a mystery to be solved, but a message to be remembered." The mother nodded slowly, tears still falling. She kissed the coffins one last time before turning away, unable to bear another moment. As the pallbearers prepared to carry them out, the sky outside began to rumble. A light drizzle started to fall, tapping gently on the church windows. Some said it felt like the heavens were crying too. Outside, as the coffins were carried toward the cemetery, people followed quietly, holding umbrellas and flowers. The entire town came together, walking in silence behind the family. The sound of footsteps on wet ground filled the air. Every few steps, the mother looked back at the coffins, making sure they were still close together. At the cemetery, the 3 graves were already prepared, side by side beneath an old oak tree. The mother had asked for them to be together, just like they always had been. As the coffins were lowered into the ground, she placed a small framed photo on top, the one where the father and twins were laughing in front of their home. It had always been her favorite picture. As the last shovel of soil was placed, a strange calm settled over the place. The rain stopped suddenly, and sunlight peeked through the clouds, casting a gentle glow over the 3 graves. The light hit the photo on the fresh soil, making it shine softly. Many who stood there that day said they felt something, like warmth in the air, even though it was a cold afternoon. Some whispered that it was the father's way of saying goodbye, showing that he was finally at peace now that his children were with him. Others simply closed their eyes and prayed. After everyone left, the mother stayed behind, sitting on the damp grass beside the graves. She spoke softly, telling them how much she loved them, how much she missed their laughter, their noise, their energy. She said the house felt empty now, but she promised to keep their memories alive. As the sun began to set, she noticed a small butterfly landing on the photo she had placed earlier. It stayed there for a few seconds before flying off toward the sky. She watched it disappear into the orange light, feeling for the first time a small spark of peace inside her heart. When she finally stood up to leave, she looked at the 3 graves and whispered, "Together forever." That night, when she returned home, she lit 3 candles by the window and sat beside them. She didn't cry this time. She just sat there looking at the flames flickering softly. Somehow she felt they were not gone. Maybe they were just in a place she couldn't reach yet, a place where love never ends and hands always find each other again. The next morning, people in town were still talking about what they had seen at the funeral. Some tried to explain it logically, saying maybe the body had shifted naturally. Others believed it was a sign, a reminder that a father's love doesn't end, not even in death. Whatever the truth was, one thing everyone agreed on was that no one who had attended that funeral would ever forget it. The sight of that outstretched hand reaching toward the twins' coffin stayed in their minds forever. It became more than just a tragic story. It became a symbol of unbreakable love, something deeper than life itself. And in the small house at the end of the street, a mother sat quietly each evening looking at the sky, whispering the same words over and over again. "You found them, my love. You found them." Days turned into weeks after the funeral, yet the house remained heavy with silence. Every corner still carried the presence of the ones who were gone. The mother often caught herself expecting to hear the twins laughing in their room, or the sound of her husband's keys at the door after work. But there was only quiet now, a quiet so deep that sometimes it hurt more than the tears. Each morning she made herself a cup of tea, the same way she used to make it for both of them. She would sit near the window, staring at the road outside, watching cars pass by and wonder how something so normal could still go on when her world had stopped. The days blurred together. The only thing that seemed to give her strength was visiting their graves. Every evening she walked to the cemetery with fresh flowers. She would clean the gravestones gently, talk to them as if they were still there, and tell them how her day went. People who passed by often stopped for a moment, feeling both sadness and admiration for her. They could see the love in her eyes, the same love that refused to fade away no matter how much time passed. One afternoon, while cleaning her husband's old wallet to keep it safe, she found something tucked behind an old receipt. It was a small folded note, written in his handwriting. Her hands began to shake as she opened it carefully. The paper had a small grease stain on the corner, probably from his work at the garage. The note said, "Don't forget, after work I'll drive the twins to Grandma's house. They've been waiting all week. No matter where they go, I'll always be beside them." The words struck her like a wave. She couldn't stop reading them over and over. The handwriting was shaky but warm, filled with his usual kindness. That simple line, "No matter where they go, I'll always be beside them," felt like something more than just a note. It was almost as if he knew. She pressed the paper to her chest and began to cry, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was something else. A feeling that maybe her husband had kept his promise even beyond life. The image of his outstretched hand at the funeral came rushing back to her mind. She remembered how it seemed to reach toward the twins, how peaceful he looked. She whispered softly, "You meant it, didn't you? You never let them go." Later that evening, she framed the note and placed it on the shelf beside their photo. The picture showed all three of them smiling in front of the house, sunlight glowing on their faces. It had always been her favorite. Now, the note beside it made the picture feel complete, like a message that love had somehow found a way to stay. As days went by, the strange story about the funeral began to spread across the town. People talked about the father's hand that had mysteriously moved during the night. Some said it was just the natural settling of the body, something that sometimes happens, but others believed it was something spiritual, a sign that love had crossed the line between this world and the next.